Can Jack Plummer be a top-5 quarterback in the ACC this upcoming season? I think everything is in place for him to be one. We'll talk about that. Also predicting the quarterback depth chart and talking about members of the quarterback room that could be on the outside looking in as we head into the season. All coming up on today's episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I serve as a credential media member for Cardinals Sports Zone. I also do some PA announcing work for the university in various sports. I want to take this time to thank you all for making this show your favorite listen of the day, your first listen of the day, I should say, 5 days a week, your team every day. All about the quarterbacks room on today's episode of the show. We're going to talk about why everything is in place for Louisville quarterback Jack Plummer to be a top-5 quarterback in the ACC. We'll also predict the depth chart at the position and talk about who could be on the outside looking in as we go into fall camp and into that first game of the season against Georgia Tech. So if you didn't tune into the show last year, if you're sort of a newer visitor to the show, one thing we did was a series on position previews for the football team, going down the line, talking about each position in its entirety. We're going to do that this year. So this is going to kick off the series. The first installment of the series is dedicated to the quarterbacks, and a lot of change to the position. Obviously, the head coaching change. You go from more of an offense that's based upon the run, setting up the pass based upon the run, to more of a pro-style balanced attack. It's not going to be an air raid offense like some fans, I feel like, have convinced themselves it's going to be. More of a balanced pro-style attack with Jeff Brom at the helm, but make no mistake about it, it's going to be more of a fun offense to watch. But another thing, as it relates to changes, this is the first time since essentially 2020 that the Cardinals have a new starting quarterback coming into the season. Malik Cunningham has been the Cardinals starter since 2020. In that 2019 season, Jawan Pass got some snaps as the starting quarterback, especially with Malik Cunningham hurt. And then Malik took over that position, got hurt through the middle of the season. Evan Conley came in, gave the Cardinals some solid performances. But nonetheless, since 2020, a lot of consistency at the position. Now you go into the transfer portal, you get a grad transfer from California, Jack Plummer. And I know that some people look at his statistics over the past couple seasons. He transferred from Purdue when Brom was there. Went to California, didn't have the greatest season. I mean, statistically, not jumping off the charts. I mean, a little under 3,100 yards, 21 touchdowns to 9 interceptions, average 6.9 yards per completion, had a 62.5 completion percentage, which was the third lowest of his career, but pretty much almost actually tripled his passing attempts. He threw 451 passes last year. 6'5" senior from Gilbert, Arizona. I think it's safe to say that he is able to be penciled in as the Cardinal starter. I understand that there is a competition. I understand that nothing is given, but at the end of the day, the writing is on the wall. 1-year grad transfer, has played under Brom before. Brom went out into the transfer portal and got him to commit to Louisville. And I think barring unforeseeable injury or, just a phenomenon to where Plummer struggles mightily, I think that we're looking at Plummer being the starter by an overwhelming margin in 2023. I don't think that should surprise anyone. But for this episode, I thought it was interesting to go back and look at all of the current up-to-date preseason quarterback rankings for the ACC. I haven't seen one where Jack Plummer is higher than number 6. Now, there might be one out there, but I looked at about 5 to 6 different rankings, and Jack Plummer was mainly in that 7 to 10 range. He was number 10 in some instances, number 7 in others. Looking at an article back in March from Will Backus of 24/7 Sports. He rated Jack Plummer as the 7th best quarterback in the conference, essentially saying that, the changes at the position, you lose a dynamic player like Malik Cunningham. Noted that Plummers is pretty talented, but nonetheless, there's some solid players in the conference. I mean, it was a quarterback carousel in the ACC. I mean, Phil Yurkovich goes from Boston College to Pittsburgh, Brennan Armstrong, Virginia to NC State. You have Garrett Schrader back at Syracuse, Riley Leonard back at Duke. Going on down the line, Sam Hartman goes to Notre Dame. So I guess maybe if you want to consider him in those rankings, I personally don't, because Notre Dame's not in the ACC. And then not to mention Cade Klubnik over at Clemson, Jordan Travis, the former Cardinal at Florida State, and then, in my opinion, the number 1 quarterback in the ACC and the number 2 in the country, Drake May from North Carolina. So saying that everything is in place for Plummer to be a top 5 quarterback in the ACC is not really something that we can say lightly. There are a ton of solid players at the position throughout the conference. Now, I'm not saying that he's going to be. I'm saying that everything is in place for him to be. Number 1, for starters, Jeff Brom has alluded to it. The familiarity with the system that Brom runs is something that's going to benefit him right out of the gate. It's already doing so. Brom told Plummer's high school coach that, look, I can't stump him. There's nothing that I throw at him that confuses him. A very wise quarterback, has a lot of, college experience under his belt, playing multiple years at the Power 5 level. California this past season, transferred from Purdue after getting hurt, losing out the battle to Aiden O'Connell, goes to California, has his best season by far, plays behind pretty much a struggling offensive line, and had some pretty big performances this season for Cal. So that familiarity with the system is something that I think benefits him right away, because it's going to allow for nearly seamless transition. I don't think it's going to be something to where he's going to be in the Heisman, consideration, week 1. I mean, I'm not saying that that's the case, but overall, I think that is reason number 1 why I think everything is in place, because you have that season familiarity. Number 2, I think the trajectory of the career is something we need to look at as well. 6'5" quarterback, veteran at the position, had his best season as a pocket passer, got the meaningful reps, was the starter at UC Berkeley, got the opportunity to go out there and prove what he could bring to the table, and he had his best season to date. So he is building off of that momentum. You look at some of the games that he played this past season, had 300 yards and 4 touchdowns against UCLA, almost beat them on Thanksgiving weekend. USC, 35 for 49, 406 yards and 3 touchdowns. Oregon didn't necessarily have the greatest game, but showed tremendous poise, had some solid performances. Only one game that he started this past year, he had under 200 yards. That was a loss to Oregon State, but nonetheless, his best season overall. Granted, this is going to be a different style than Louisville's used to, having gone from a multiple dual threat quarterback, a guy that can hurt you with his legs as much as he can his arm, to now going more of a pro style quarterback. So you have that career trajectory, right? He showed poise when he played some top teams. I understand Pac-12 defenses are not the greatest, but there is some things to watch for. There's been moments where he's perfectly placed balls into very small, tight windows, which is something that I found extremely encouraging. And he did so behind an offensive line that was not good. And that comes to the third reason as to why I think that this is sort of a perfect storm, is that he is joining, on paper, the best offense that he will have played for. You have a solid offensive line led by Brian Hudson, Michael Gonzalez, Renato Brown, a handful of very solid transfers that started multiple games over their college careers, respectively. You have a solid running back room led by Jawar Jordan, who I've said multiple times I think is going to be a 1,000-yard rusher. You have guys like Maurice Turner, Isaac Garendo, so on and so forth. And then at the wide receiver core, Jamari Thrash has been raved about all over by national college football analysts as being one of the best players in the transfer portal. It's a Sun Belt Player of the Year, the best wide receiver in the Sun Belt. Kevin Coleman Jr., star freshman for Jackson State last year for Deion Sanders. You have some other guys, Jimmy Callaway, Jaden Thompson, Amari Huggins, Bruce is back. You have some four-star guys coming in like William Fowles. It's going to be a very solid wide receiver room. Tight end is a little bit of a question, but you still have Jamari Johnson, who I read is at 6'5", 280 pounds, and feels comfortable playing at that size, and that is incredible. It could be interesting to see what Louisville does at the tight end position, but on paper, this offense is, on paper, like I said, the best that he played with. And number 4, this is another thing you can't look away from. The schedule presents a solid opportunity. Look, it's no it's no secret that, Louisville's missing out playing a ton of the ACC's top teams, Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina, the projected top 3, almost consensus. Louisville doesn't have to play them. The toughest games of the season, Notre Dame, Kentucky, potentially NC State, maybe Pittsburgh, Duke. A lot of these games Louisville's going to be favored in. I think that the Cardinals got, a slate that is very beneficial for long-term success this season. So I think that there is a handful of reasons why Jack Plummer could be a top 5 quarterback. Everything is in place. You have the system familiarity. He's coming into a system that he knows. He is coming off of his best season. A veteran that has played, high collegiate snaps, is coming off of his best season. Number 3, the offense on paper is the best that he will have played with in his collegiate career. And number 4, he has the schedule that allows him to potentially, if he has to struggle, potentially, be able to catch his footing and get to a point to where he is really, really having a successful season. So will he get to that point? Who knows? Can he? 100%. I think that people are overlooking this addition for Louisville. I'm not just saying this as a Cardinals fan, as the host of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I truly do believe that everything is in line for Plummer to be a top 5 quarterback in the ACC. But we know that. We know that Plummer is the starter. And the main thing now is, well, who is going to be, leading up the depth chart? Number 2, number 3. Is it Brady Allen, Pierce Clarkson, Harrison Bailey, Brock Doman, Evan Conley? We're going to talk about that here in just a second after we talk about our friends over at Birddogs. Look, we talked about Birddogs over the past couple of weeks, and they are the shorts and pants that make you feel good. They make you look good. They're versatile. You can go swimming in them. You can have a barbecue in them. You can have a work meeting in them. The stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. They essentially do the same exact thing as Lululemon, but they fit way better. They fit way better than overall regular shorts that are made by a stiff, restricting cotton. Birddogs fixed that issue by inventing cloud knit fabric that looks just like khakis but feel tremendously better. Birddogs.com/lockedoncollege is where you need to go to claim a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/lockedoncollege for a free Yeti-style tumbler. You won't want to take your Birddogs off. We will promise you that. All right. Heading on in to the second segment of the show. Got to bring back up the graphic. There we go. Look, we know that Jack Plummer is 99% going to be the starting quarterback heading into fall camp, and barring unforeseeable injury or him just absolutely not playing good, he's going to be the starter. What about after him? Who's going to take the second, third on the depth chart? Is it going to be one of the incoming transfers, Brady Allen or Harrison Bailey? Is it going to be one of the returning guys, Brock Doman or Evan Conley? Or will it be true freshman Pierce Clarkson? One thing is for sure is that the quarterback room is stocked with solid players that can come in and I think give Louisville a great chance to win football games. Depth has not been the Cardinals' friend really since Bobby Petrino's second stint. I don't think that Louisville really had a ton of depth since Satterfield took over. And Braum said, you know what? We're going to completely revamp the quarterback room. Nathan McElroy entered the portal. Caleb Johnson entered the portal. They end up bringing in Brady Allen and Harrison Bailey alongside Pierce Clarkson. So who's 2 and 3? Well, I think number 2, you look at guys like Pierce Clarkson, him missing spring practice is something that I think you have to acknowledge. Brock Doman, I think, is another guy to look at. I think heading into fall camp is going to be one thing, but by the first game, I'm going to say that Brady Allen is number 2 on the depth chart. I understand he only completed one pass last year for Purdue. He's got one completion for 3 attempts for 8 yards. I understand that, but the 6'6" Fort Branch, Indiana native, ranked very highly coming out of the 2022 class. Not a lot of opportunity playing behind Aiden O'Connell. I think is the guy that is going to rise up into that second depth chart spot. I think that overall, this is a situation to where at the end of the day, I think that the talent is going to jump off the film. I think that he's going to be a player that's going to really, really, impress in fall camp. He has the talent. It's a matter of putting that together. And not to mention, he has a year in this offense with Jeff and Brian Brom. So I think that that's going to give him sort of an advantage while the other guys may be veterans, but they still have to learn this system. I think that that's going to give Brady Allen the edge. So in my opinion, Allen is going to be second on the depth chart. Maybe not right away. I think you have some veterans like Brock Doman, like Evan Conley, who you could say, well, they're going to be on the depth chart immediately. Because of their veteran status. I think with the new coaching staff, with the new playbook, with the new scheme, I don't necessarily think that's going to be the case. I do think that maybe a little bit of a familiarity with the personnel on offense could work to their advantage. But I think Brady Allen is going to get that second spot on the depth chart. Number 3, this is interesting here. Could it be Harrison Bailey? Could it be Evan Conley? I know that Conley had some solid moments in the spring. Brock Doman as well. Or could it be Pierce Clarkson, fully healthy? I know that he's a possible redshirt candidate. We'll talk about next. We'll talk about that in the next segment. But could he be a guy that slides into that third spot on the depth chart? I think number 3, in my opinion, you have essentially all 4 of the guys are going to be in line to compete for this. I think that you could honestly pick a number 1 through 4, and you could justify the case of any of these 4 guys. Personally, for me, I'm going to give the edge to Brock Doman. I think Doman is a player that this is where that veteran experience really pays off. This is where the familiarity with some of the guys on this roster pays off. We know about Brock's arm strength. I think that with the right coaching, with the right teaching and right development, he could be a guy that is able to build off some of those physical tools that he has. A 6'2" junior from Colorado Springs, Colorado, coming in from the JUCO ranks, spending the last 2 years at Louisville, did not complete a single pass in 2021. But this past season, Malik Cunningham had some issues with injuries, and he came in and he won Louisville the game against Virginia. But other than that, sort of pedestrian numbers. I mean, he completed 55% of his passes, had 998 yards, 4 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 32 carries for 64 yards and a touchdown. So not the greatest of numbers, but I do believe that he has the arm to be able to, fill out the remaining depth chart. He has the experience. He has the experience with this roster and has, the overall, I think, arm strength to take this third spot. Now, granted, things are up in the air, right? I think you could easily make the case for Evan Conley, for Harrison Bailey, for Pierce Clarkson. But I think going into that first game, I think it's going to take some time for maybe Bailey or Clarkson to prove themselves. I think that this could really be a coin flip with Doman or Conley, considering, their veteran status. Conley's a guy that has played some snaps for Louisville and has helped out. But overall, I think that Doman is probably the guy that fills out the depth chart, gives you that opportunity at the third option if you need him to come in and potentially win you games, because he's shown that. I think that with a better system, with better, with a more offensive-minded coach, quarterbacks-minded coach with Jeff Brom, one of the best quarterback developers in the country. He's done it with, very underrated guys. I think that this is a possible great situation for Brock Doman. So depth chart for me, it goes Jack Plummer, Brady Allen at number 2, Brock Doman at number 3. So on the outside looking in, by process of elimination, you have 3 players: Harrison Bailey, Evan Conley, and Pierce Clarkson. We're going to talk about, their pathways to starting or not starting, but their pathways to getting on the depth chart and what could be holding them back from getting on that depth chart here momentarily. Before we do that, I want to thank you all again for making us your first listen every day. Everydayers, like I mentioned, what you can expect on the podcast coming up, we're going to continue in the series of positional previews. The next episode, we'll be talking about the running back position. So be sure to tune in there and talking about Jawar Jordan, Kewan Brown, Isaac Garendo, and Maurice Turner. But nonetheless, final segment of the show discussing the quarterback's position at Louisville, first installment of the annual preview series for positions. We talked about why Jack Plummer could be a top 5 quarterback in the ACC. We talked about the depth chart. Outside of that, who is on the outside looking in? Well, if you've been paying attention, you know that on the outside looking in, Pierce Clarkson, Harrison Bailey, and Evan Conley. I think for Pierce Clarkson, this is not an indication of him not being talented enough. I think it's just essentially this being a crowded quarterback room. He's coming off of an injury, so that kind of stunted the growth that he could have had in the spring being an early enrollee. As he works back to full strength, as he continues to learn the playbook, I think that the talent is there, but him being a true freshman, unlike the other guys, Brady Allen having redshirted last year, Harrison Bailey, Evan Conley, Brock Doman, and Jack Plummer all being veterans, I think that you can feel comfortable redshirting Pierce Clarkson year one, maybe giving him some snaps here and there in blowout situations, but overall you feel comfortable letting this be a developmental learning year for Clarkson. And it seemed like that could have been the case heading into the season, even before Plummer committed, before Brady Allen and Harrison Bailey announced that they were going to be transferring to Louisville. So it makes a lot of sense here. I think that this is not an indication of Pierce's lack of talent, because he's obviously very talented. He has an opportunity in 2024 to be that starter for Louisville. But I think this year, it just makes a lot of sense to give him that opportunity to learn behind veterans, to learn the playbook, and, gear towards 2024. With the other two guys, it gets a little tricky. Evan Conley had a year in 2019 to where, depending on who you asked, could have potentially been a guy that some looked at as a potential starter in 2020. I mean, in 2019, he only had 613 yards and 4 touchdowns to go with 3 interceptions, completed 56% of his passes. But it's how he came in relief, won a big-time game against Wake Forest on the road in Winston-Salem. It was a shootout, which the Cardinals ended up winning, which was big-time. Louisville, he helped Louisville win a couple of other games when Malik Cunningham went down. But since then, he really hasn't been all that solid. He didn't have a single pass attempt this season. Didn't have a single completed pass. The past 2 years, he was 4 or 5 in 2020. He was 10 of 19 in 2021 for 79 yards and a touchdown. Has battled some injury issues as well. So, the 6'2 junior, could be a player that this could be his last season, to where, maybe after this year, he goes out as a grad transfer and looks to be a starter for a different team in 2024. But at this point, I haven't really seen much from Conley in the past 2 seasons or 3 seasons to suggest that, he's not on the outside looking in, maybe with a change of scheme, maybe with, a change in head coach, a change in instruction. Maybe he is a guy that could be on the back end of the depth chart. But I think as of right now, we haven't seen anything since 2019, which was 4 years ago, that suggests that Conley is a player that he was going to be on the depth chart. I can't justify him being on there over Allen or Doman. The other player, this is a wild card. Harrison Bailey, very highly rated guy coming out of high school in the Marietta, Georgia area, 6'5", committed to Tennessee, obviously, with Hendon Hooker and Joe Milton being there. He transfers to UNLV after spending 2 seasons at Tennessee. He had 578 yards in 2020, 4 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. 2022 transfers to UNLV, 30 of 58, 318 yards, 2 touchdowns to 1 interception. Appeared in 5 games, had over 100 yards passing once. He is a walk-on for Louisville, 6'5". So there's talent there, but it just doesn't seem like he's been able to put it together. I think that this is one of those depth moves that, it's probably nothing more than depth. A possible, insurance, a move that gives you insurance if your quarterback room is decimated by injury. But overall, a guy that really hasn't been able to put it together. I think that Bailey is probably on the outside looking in as well. Again, not much to suggest that he's going to be considered over Doman. You might be able to say Brady Allen, but I think that in this case, I think Brady Allen being highly rated as well, I really am high on his development. I think that the familiarity with the system is there as well. But I mean, Bailey was ranked just outside the top 100. I mean, like literally ranked as the 101st best player in the country in his high school class, but really just hasn't found his footing, hasn't been able to, take that next step. Overall, I think Conley and Bailey are very solid options if you have to use them as the fourth and fifth guys. But overall, I think that both of those are on the outside looking in. So overall, Jack Plummer, the starter, could be a possible top 5 quarterback in the ACC, considering that everything is in line to go right. It just has to go right, obviously. You have to play the games. Depth chart predictions, I think if you made me go down the line, I think it's Jack Plummer, Brady Allen, Brock Doman, Evan Conley, Harrison Bailey, and then Pierce Clarkson as the redshirt. If he doesn't redshirt, which I'm not sure why he wouldn't, if he's not, number 2 or 3 on the depth chart, which he may be. But at this point in time, I think it's probably smart to redshirt him. Overall, that is my analysis of the quarterback position as we head into the season. The question for you all, drop a comment down in the YouTube section, comment on social media under the episode post. Who do you think is going to be the backup to Jack Plummer this upcoming season at the beginning of the year and then in the final game of the season? Let me know down in the comments below. But that's going to wrap up today's episode of the show. Everyone have a great day. We'll see you right back here very soon. For those who need to find the Locked On Louisville podcast, you can do so right here.